For those of you that are a Clemson fan, can you just raise your hand for a second? Clemson fans? Okay. USC fans? Do you mind if I I don't want to embarrass you, I just want you to raise your hands. We're going to do something today. We're going to be talking about taming the tongue. But I want you to find, Clemson fans, I want you to find a USC fan. USC fans, find your Clemson fans. Tell them that you're thankful for them today. Can you guys just get up, find somebody, and just tell them, you know what? No matter what happened last night, I'm still thankful for you. But in all seriousness, this week, Kyle and I had a full house, just with all of my family. My siblings came from Clemson area and from Florida, and it was wonderful. They all have children, and so we got to have three little kiddos running around our house, touching things and putting things out of order. And of course, it's driving me nuts. But I'm so thankful for them and just how wonderful it was to be with them, to host. Getting to see my wife put over a pound of butter inside of a turkey was really fun to watch as well too. That was good. It was delicious, though, I might add. We don't actually have that many leftovers left. I'm thankful for that. But again, here we are just in this season of thankfulness and all these wonderful things coming up with Christmas, and we have this sort of excitement just in the air, right? We have all these things that are just building to the end of this year, and it's so exciting just to look forward to. And so, with that said though, with family, sometimes awkward things can be said, right? We have these awkward moments that just come up and pop up. It's like, ooh, like you've got this wonderful, perfect, stereotypical dinner with all the families together, but yet there's just that one person, maybe that one estranged uncle somewhere in the mix that just says something, and you're like, ooh, that was not what I needed to hear right now, right? It can just set that sort of tone. And so, here we are in the book of James, in our series we're calling Get Wise. We've built on these things. We've talked about how to persevere under trial. We've talked about the valley and what that looks like. That was so wonderful this morning. Thank you again, Wyman, for that. But we go through these valleys, we have these trials, and we have to be able to persevere. That's what James wrote about in the first chapter. He talks about faith that works. He talks about deeds and doing things to produce fruit in your life, in your faith. We also talked about destructive favoritism. We talked about how impartialness is what God is calling us toward, that we can't afford to just be prejudiced, and we can't afford to be in this mindset where there are people that are better than others. Last week we had Brittany Jolly, who's a church planter in the Low Country near Charleston, and she talked about unity through community, and it was wonderful to have her. It was great. But today we're here to talk about how to tame the tongue. And so I know this is just in nature something that can be kind of coarse, and it's going to sound like, again, I'm buttering you up, but I'm not. I'm not here to beat you up today. I'm here to encourage you. I'm here to tell you that there is hope and that there's something that we can learn from James today. And so today's theme is really more or less, say what? And so here we are. We have to be able to tame our tongue. And so as a quick question, just by show of hands, has anybody's mouth ever got them in trouble before? Anybody? I know mine certainly has. I was reading through just a couple different websites and just some funny illustrations for today, and a couple of things that I found were, first off, 3 of the best lies that kids have ever told their parents. So the first one, my son was visiting his grandma, and he said that they killed a polar bear in their grandma's backyard and they were eating it for dinner. And of course, they live in Florida, so very, very unlikely that there's a polar bear in Florida. Next one, my 3-year-old had an accident. And so I asked him why he didn't use the potty, and he told me that it wasn't him. He said that he was playing with Legos, and his little brother walked up to him, apparently opened up his pants, and pooped in his britches. And so, again, he said, I tried to stop him, but he just kept pooping my britches. Apparently that's what his little brother did to him. And last, my husband has a job that requires him to travel a lot, and while he'd been gone for a business trip, our 7-year-old daughter had invited her best friend to a church event and was surprised to see my husband there. The best friend was surprised to see her husband there. And so he said, upon seeing him, I thought you said your dad was in jail. Because the best friend had never seen this other girl's dad. She had no idea who he was, why he was there. And so I guess somehow in that little girl's trying to explain where her daddy was, he apparently was in jail. So there's that. But this one might hit a little bit closer to home. Some of us have to control our tongue. 5 funny things you probably don't want to tell your boss in an elevator. Right off the bat, it says, I'm sorry, but your presentation was just awful. That's a good one to start off with. Second, I've spent hours just wondering how in the world you got this job. That's a good one to tell your boss, right? A third one, I'm leaving because your face makes me want to punch you. That's a little bit of honesty, right? But probably not something you want to tell them. Another good scenario, as you're getting in an elevator, just say, see you soon. And you still have 15 floors until you have to get off the elevator. That's a little bit of an awkward experience there. And the last one, this is just weird, but I think it's hilarious. Just crack open your briefcase and you whisper, got enough air in there? That one, that's probably going to get you some weird looks from not just your boss, but from other people. And so, again, here we are. We're talking about the holidays. We're talking about things to be thankful for. And our mouths can just get us in trouble, right? And so, James, again, to understand the book of James, it's sort of like the Proverbs in the Old Testament. It's referred to as wisdom literature. Wisdom literature, Kylie covered it in the previous series, but the book of Job, Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, these are all wisdom literature in the Bible. And so the equivalent of wisdom literature in the New Testament is the book of James. Now again, James kind of writes it more like a magazine article almost. It's kind of these little truths that just pop up. So again, in context, they're not always going to work together in the perfect way, but rather isolated, they have truth in them. And so what James is saying, basically in different parts of his writing, in his letter, he said, more or less, you need to be producing fruit. You need to be doing things that are good. You need to be saying the right things. You need to make sure that you're not in conflict with other people. You need to make sure that you are living a life that is hopeful, that is encouraging. And so here he is, finally getting to the part that is so hard for a lot of people, Christians, non-Christian alike, is controlling your tongue. And so, if you would just read with me in James 3, we're going to be reading the first 12 verses to start off. It should be on the screen, but if not, you can just listen in. James writes, not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways, and anyone who is never at fault in what they say is perfect, able to keep their whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world full of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. With the tongue, we praise our Lord and Father, and with it, we also curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth comes praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. Now again, heavy words, but there's a lot of truth to be learned from this. So if you would just go ahead and join with me in prayer. Father God, we are so thankful to you, Lord, that you have saved us, that you have brought us into a place where we can worship you. And Lord, as we look into your word today, as we reflect on what your prophets and what your believers have written over the years, thousands of years ago, Lord, just ask that you would allow it to speak to us, that it would inspire us, Lord, that we would just be mindful of the things that we say and how much potential for good and evil it has. Lord, we just love you and we thank you again for this worship service. Be with us now at this time. In your name, amen. Now, again, James is writing to an audience of this church that needed to just have a better, more quality faith. Their faith was coming from a place of just legalism. It was coming from a place of impartialness. I mean, they were just being so misguided in the way that they were bringing up more disciples. And so James is here to say, again, your mouth is something that is really causing you guys to hurt your witness in the church. And so here he is, and he's saying all these things, and all those first 12 verses are saying simply is what he's pointing to is that the things we say come from our heart. More or less, he's talking about how this wonderful yet terrifying thing that we have in our mouths, our tongues, can say such incredible things, encouragement, inspiring, and yet can be so destructive and just awful. And so he's saying that we have to control because the things that we say are coming from our heart. Jesus himself said it best in Matthew 15:18. This should be on the screen. He says, what comes out from a person's mouth. He says, but the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. Now again, Jesus did not have a time to mince words. He was not there to play favorites or to play politics. Jesus was there to change the world. And so he was telling his disciples this in the context of other Pharisees that were just telling them that they were doing things that were going to defile them by eating on the Sabbath. And yet, here they were, of course, being slanderers. They were the people that were condemning other people, thinking that they were better than others. And so Jesus, again, is just leveling the playing field and saying, look, you're condemning my disciples for eating on the Sabbath, but yet that's not what's really defiling them. The thing that defiles is what we say. The things that we say are what are going to be, that we can be judged upon. And so Jesus, again, is just saying that words are the things that defile us. The things that we are saying, they come from a place deep inside of what is truly going on in our hearts. It just naturally overflows from what we say. And so what we say matters. You may not always believe that. You may not always feel like, you can just say something in passing. Again, I am very much a fan of Dabo Sweeney. I'm not a huge Tigers fan, I'll just admit it. But I am a big fan of Dabo Sweeney. But he had a moment last night where he just got too much, right? He said something, he regretted it. And so he was honest, and he just said, that was a moment of weakness, and he apologized. But again, what he says matters. All those kids that he's, coaching and teaching, he's obviously a huge role model, but he has to be able to make sure that he's up to the bar, that he's not doing things that's going to lead them astray. And so what we say matters, and also what we say really says more about us than anything or anybody else. What we say really says more about our hearts. Now, think about it in your lives. When I am not feeling connected with God, when I am not really in a place where I'm healthy, I'm naturally not going to be uplifting and encouraging, right? I'm going to say things that are going to hurt, they're going to tear people down. But when I'm in line with God, I'm naturally going to carry over and encourage. I'm going to inspire. It works the same way with us. But also, the warning in Jesus' words and in James' words is that our words can also condemn us. Our words, again, they can get on file, they can get on the record, and they can just hurt our witness. They can prevent us from having a truly evangelistic experience. They can prevent us from having community with one another. They can divide us. They can tear us apart. And so, again, what comes out of a person's mouth comes from the heart, and what you say matters. Another good principle just to remember with words is that, again, simply garbage in, garbage out. The things you're hearing on the radio, the politics maybe that you listen to, these people that just want to contort and manipulate, if we just listen to them on repeat and repeat, again, most people, when you go to worship service, you're probably not going to remember the sermons most likely. You're going to remember the words that you sang in your song because we're just repeating them and repeating them. But the more you hear things, again, outside of the context of worship and in the world, when you hear negativity, more than likely you're going to spit out negativity, right? All it takes is a spark. Again, look at what James writes in verses 5 through 6 in James chapter 3. He says, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. And the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Now again, I just read that and I think, man, while my tongue has incredible potential to be an amazing thing, I can encourage people, I can say things that are going to build others up, again, it can really tear people down. And so for me, I think about the fire over at Table Rock last year. I was just doing some research on that, and it started out as a campfire, just in the middle of somewhere in the woods. But yet, because it was left unattended, because it wasn't kept under control, fast forward over a month or two, it went from basically the end of October all the way to like the first or second week of December. It's a long time for a fire to go. And through the course of that, it was over 10,000 acres just burned. Fire. Kyle and I, we'd gone on our honeymoon to Pigeon Forge area, and they'd had their fire there as well. But it was so amazing, though, while the fire had burned over, yet the underbrush was left, and it was this beautiful green. It was wonderful. But again, just thousands and thousands of acres just burned because of a slight fire that can be left unattended. And again, our mouth works the same way. We can say these things, but if we're not intentional, if we're not aware of how destructive it can make a fire out of us and make something totally that we never wanted to happen. With Table Rock specifically, though, it cost taxpayers over $5 million in damage. Don't you just feel encouraged because someone just didn't keep a fire under control, right? Now again, the mountain is healing, but it took a lot. It took a lot of manpower and a lot of time. And so again, same way works for our mouths. The things we say can be life-giving or they can be deadly. If you would read with me again in James 3, verses 9 through 12. James writes, "With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we also curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness." I just want to stop right there. Again, no one is better or worse than someone else. We are all made in the image of God, right? We all have the imago Dei, the image of God, imprinted on all of us. Every single strand of DNA that we have coursing through our body is all something that God had in mind thousands of years ago, right? Every single person around you, infinite value, infinite worth. And so, praising others and cursing others, really, it's all part of our submission to God. It's all part of what we decide we're going to be lifting up. You know, are we going to be an example of someone that is totally just encouraging someone on one side, but as soon as that person walks away, we get back to our other friends here and we're tearing them down, right? That's not what we want to be known for. We want to be known for inspiring and encouraging people. And so, again, James is just writing to this audience. He just wants to make sure that they realize the power that they have. But if you'll follow along with me in the chapter in verses 14 through 18 even, he says, "If you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, and even demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness." Now again, just going along with me, kind of being how we want to just study this passage here. The first 12 verses of the chapter are more or less the what. Like James is simply telling us why we need to do what we need to do. But then going through 13 through 18, James is really talking about how to keep yourself in check. He's writing to this audience saying, you know what, you need to check your own heart before you can really worry about what you're saying. You need to make sure that your heart is submitting to God, that you're not looking for what people say of you, you're not looking to what is your image that you want to portray. He's saying you have to make sure that you are submitting to God on every aspect of your life. And so, again, ending there in the end of verse 18 says, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. It's someone, you're going to be set apart when you're a peacemaker, when you're looking for things that are going to build others up, when you're living a pure, blameless life. That's when you're really going to be in tune with God. You're going to be submitting your heart to God. And so, again, James is saying the reason that you don't want to just let your tongue go wild and uncontrolled is because, again, all those things, it's coming from a place of bitterness and envy, selfish ambitions, But again, the heart of God is pure, it's peace-loving, it's considerate and submissive, full of mercy and good fruit. It's impartial and it's sincere, it's genuine. And so the calling we have, again, this is just more or less the how and the what. But James is saying that we have to respond instead of reacting. Now, there should be a picture of a cockroach on the screen here. And now, when you see this, there are probably different things that come to mind, right? Now, for me, I get a little bit squirmy. I'm not a huge bug fan. I would love to be around a snake any day compared to a tarantula or a cockroach, right? But my question that I have for you, when you see a cockroach, what would you do if you just see one on your floor, right? Are you just going to stomp on it immediately? Like, are you just going to get it out of there, shoo it out, whatever? Like, we have to be able to think about it. Because, again, I'm not saying anybody's a roach, but if we're just being honest, there are people that we just want to react, right? We just want to just do the first thing that comes to mind and just stomp them out. We just want to get them out of our sight, right? Again, we have to be able to respond rather than react. And so all this building, we're talking about the why. We've told you why it's important to control our tongue, but how? Like how, practically, how do you control your tongue? And so the main principle I want you to hear is that what people are saying, in the same way that what you say really is communicating more about your heart and what your value is in, the same is true for other people when they say hurtful things to you. Like really what they're saying when they say awful and hurtful things, they're saying, you know what, I'm insecure in where my identity is lying. They're saying, I am not fully confident in who I am. They're saying, you know, I really am intimidated by you, and the only way I know how to deal with that is to just, you know, insult you, basically. They just don't have the capacity to just lower themselves and to listen. And so we have to be the first ones to reach out and say, you know what, like, yes, you've said something that's very hurtful, but it's okay. I'm going to be merciful. I'm not going to just trample on you because I can. And so the thing is, it's just information. What people say, what they're communicating to you, it's really just information. Another way to remember it is not to take it personally. In other words, it's not about your mama. Like, just because they say something that's hurtful does not mean they're saying that you're an awful person. And certainly, if they are saying hurtful things about you, it is not an actual, an accurate representation or reflection of who you actually are. Now again, as a pastor, I have to keep that very much in mind because I'm in a position where I have to look at the church and realize, you know what, church is what I do. It's not who I am. At the end of the day, church is something I do. But we all have to realize that we are called to something more. If we're only evaluating our lives based on what people say, on the things that we do, again, when all that is gone, what's left, right? We all have to realize that we are infinitely loved by God. We have to realize that we are called to be His light in the world. And so, again, it's just information. All the things that you hear, all the things that you are internalizing in your head, and maybe, again, it makes you question your self-worth. Maybe it unvalidates you. Maybe you feel a little bit insulted and feel a little bit unstable in your identity. That's okay. But just remember, it's just information. And so, another principle to remember is that conflict is unavoidable, right? I don't have to tell you that. But in the same way, again, what we say reveals more about us and our heart. The same is true for others. And so, all that to say, we have to speak the truth in love. We don't have to let people walk all over us, and that's not what I'm saying. You don't need to just lie down. We have to be truthful about what we feel, and we need to be honest and use statements like I feel or I think. You know, we don't want to just put these broad strokes and generalizations on people and just say, you know what, you're the worst. But, you know, like, you make me feel unhappy. You know, like we said with our boss, you know, your face just kind of makes me want to punch you. Like, it's okay to just say that to people. But we just have to be honest and, again, just be vocal about our feelings and our emotions. We have to take a second to breathe and ask ourselves this question, which is really at the heart of this, is what I want to say coming from a heart that wants to see others built up? Is the thing that I want to say, just my knee-jerk reaction, right, or we just want to stomp on them, is that really something that's going to build them up and encourage them? That's a question we have to wrestle with. Now again, if it's not, that's where we need to submit to God. That's a point of we just need to be honest with ourselves and just say, you know what, Lord, I'm not submitting to you in that area. I need to be more intentional to ask for patience. Because again, God has a sense of humor. If you ask him for patience, more than likely he's going to give you the opportunity to be patient, right? And so we have to make sure that we are looking to see others grow. Now, the thing that we can always do, and sometimes that can be hard to avoid in the church, and again, I'm not saying this is directed at anybody in this room, but we just have to make sure that we are not disguising our prayer requests as gossip, right? Like we can say, oh man, Pastor, I really need to pray about this person that did such and such and such and such and such, right? We have to make sure that we are above that. We have to make sure that we are not stooping down to that level, because that's not appropriate for Christians. That's not appropriate for believers to do. One principle I like to stick with is, if I'm not a part of the problem, first of all, I'm probably not going to listen. But also, if I can be a part of the solution, I might listen in. But if I'm not, I'm just going to be hands off. And so we have to make sure that we are willing to just step back once we're brought in. Just because it's your issue does not mean it's my issue, right? On the flip side, if I'm not willing to say up front, if I'm not willing to say things in front of other people, I have no business telling other people about it that aren't involved with the situation at all. If I'm not willing to say this in front of the person, I don't share it with anybody else, period. And so those are just some good principles to live by as far as controlling the tongue. But again, here's really the heart of what James is getting at. And it's so crucial to our lives today. The whole purpose of this series is to get wise in our faith, to have this true wisdom. Verse 17, it says it so perfectly. It's just that this true wisdom is found only in wisdom in God. And again, it's peace-loving, it's pure, it's submissive, it's considerate, it's full of mercy and good fruit, it's impartial and sincere. That's what true, wise faith looks like. And so, again, I'm here as a servant, and I'm realizing more and more how thankful I am for our church. I'm realizing more and more how wonderful it is to be in this place and to have fellow believers that I can fellowship with, that I can be honest with. Because again, our world is hard. Our world is dark. I don't need to tell you that. You know that. But our world is becoming more and more complicated too. Just the more complex, the more connected we get, it just seems like the more divided we get also at the same time. And so we have to be able to live above not just what the world would say is okay, but we have to really look at what God is saying is appropriate. We have to look at what God is truly calling us to. And so my heart is really just in a place where I'm questioning that myself. Like, how am I really going to control my tongue? Because there are times where I could just snap. Like, it'd be so easy, right? It's so much easier to default to snapping and just defaulting to just trampling on people. But we can't do that. We have to be considerate. We have to be submissive. And so, I don't know where your heart is today. I don't know what you're feeling. Maybe this week has been a hard roller coaster of emotions for you. You know, maybe there's someone missing at the table that you really, really just wanted to be there, and they weren't. Whether circumstance or health, whatever it be, the holidays are hard times for everybody. But we also just have to remember, too, that the hope of the gospel is not diminished by what people say. It's not diminished by what people think of you. It's not diminished by anything that is ever misrepresented. But we have to make sure, as believers, as people that claim this wonderful hope, we have to be above and beyond considerate. We have to be so mindful of others, of where their positions are, and where their hurt is, what's really going on beneath the surface. And again, if that's you today, that's okay. You just need to be honest and say, you know what? Like, I'm not submitting to God in this one thing, in this particular area. Maybe that one person at work just really irks me to the core, and I have no sympathy for them. You know, it's just pure apathy. But maybe you're on the other side of the spectrum, and you know what? Like, you know you're living in this will of God, but you're still, there's just not an opportunity for you to really see that lived out. And so my prayer for you would simply be that you would ask God for opportunities, that you would see God do something in your life that would draw people to you, and even more than that, draw people to Him. because that's what it's really about. As we enter into this season of holidays and the Advent season, especially next week, we're going to be talking about so many different things that God offers us through Jesus coming down to earth thousands of years ago and still changing lives today. That's something that's still alive and well, right? Amen? Amen. And so, again, we're here today, and we're missing some people, and that's okay. It's the holiday season, but I just want you to know I'm thankful for you, church. I really am. Every single one of you. Every testimony, every story, every hurt that's represented in this room, no matter how fresh or how old it may be, it's all part of our story and what it looks like for us to be truly people of faith, a wise faith that really can impact and encourage the world.